The dawn breaks quietly over a vast expanse of barren land. The air hangs heavy with anticipation, a kind of stillness that feels more like a warning than a welcome. In the distance, a whistle pierces the silence, followed by the thunder of boots striking the ground in unison. This is no ordinary morning, and these are no ordinary men and women. This is the crucible of transformation, the place where civilians are stripped down to their rawest selves and forged into soldiers. To step inside the toughest U.S. Army boot camp in history is to step into a world where human limits are not merely tested, but shattered, rebuilt, and remolded in the service of something larger than life. For generations, boot camp has stood as the very threshold of the Army, a rite of passage that every soldier must endure. But among the many phases of training, there are certain camps and certain moments in history that have become legends whispered about with both pride and dread, remembered as tests so brutal that they forged warriors who carried their scars and their lessons for the rest of their lives. At the heart of this legacy lies Fort Benning, Georgia, home of infantry training and the symbol of the Army's most punishing tests. It is here in the choking heat of the Deep South where recruits met the toughest standards of mind, body, and spirit, and where the echoes of history blend seamlessly with the sweat of today's trainees. The toughest boot camp is not defined by a single obstacle, nor by the length of a forced march. It is defined by the totality of its design, the deliberate crushing of the individual, and the rebuilding of something stronger, something unbreakable. In the darkest days of World War II, when the nation faced the greatest military challenge of its existence, boot camp took on a ferocity unmatched before or since. The U.S. Army needed millions of soldiers, not just bodies but warriors, capable of storming beaches, holding lines, and surviving the unimaginable. To achieve this, training became grueling beyond comprehension. Recruits were pushed into 18-hour days, their lungs filled with the smoke of live fire exercises, their feet blistered by endless marches across rough terrain, their minds worn thin by relentless discipline. It was here that the Army learned to harden ordinary men into the kind of soldiers who could endure Omaha Beach, the Ardennes, and the march into Berlin. Imagine a young recruit in 1942, fresh from a small town, carrying nothing but the weight of his own uncertainty. He has never traveled beyond his county line, never fired a rifle, never known hunger or exhaustion in the way the Army is about to teach him. The first morning arrives like a thunderclap. Drill sergeants descend with voices like cannons, barking orders with precision, stripping away hesitation and comfort. Within minutes, the recruit's world of familiarity evaporates. Hair shorn to stubble, uniform issued, identity reduced to a number, he begins the process of becoming part of a collective force, an organism larger than himself. The Army is not interested in individuality here. It is interested in cohesion, in discipline, in the unyielding bond of soldiers who must rely on each other when the bullets start flying. The physical demands are punishing. Long runs at dawn under the weight of heavy packs, push-ups and pull-ups until muscles scream. Obstacle courses that feel like miniature battlefields. But the physical is only the beginning. Sleep is scarce, meals are rushed, and every mistake is punished with brutal efficiency. A dropped rifle is not just a mistake. It is a lesson in responsibility drilled into the marrow of the bone. A missed step in formation is not just clumsiness. It is a potential weakness in a line that must never break under fire. Slowly, relentlessly, recruits learn that their survival, and the survival of those next to them, depends on absolute discipline. But toughness is not only measured in sweat and muscle, it is measured in the moments when the human spirit is brought to its breaking point. In the jungles of Vietnam, boot camp evolved again, sharpening itself against the realities of a war unlike any before. Trainees were not only conditioned for combat, they were conditioned for chaos. They crawled through mud under live gunfire, trained to march for days on little water, taught to react to ambushes as if life depended on it, because it did. The Army adapted boot camp to the unpredictability of guerrilla warfare, producing soldiers who could survive in hostile jungles, soldiers who could fight an enemy they could not always see, soldiers who understood that every second of hesitation could mean death. The drill sergeants who oversaw these recruits were not just instructors, they were sculptors of steel. Their methods were harsh, sometimes merciless, but rooted in the knowledge that weakness in training meant casualties in battle. They were feared, often hated, but later remembered as the voices that carried soldiers through their darkest days in combat. Every insult, every punishment, every impossible demand was a brick laid in the foundation of resilience. The toughest boot camp in history was not simply a physical trial, it was a psychological crucible. A place where fear was transformed into focus, where doubt was burned away until only determination remained. Beyond the wars, boot camp also reflected the changing face of America. During integration, it became a place where young men of different races, different backgrounds, and different beliefs were forced to live, train, and fight as one. In the face of prejudice, the army demanded unity. In the shadow of inequality, the barracks demanded brotherhood, and it was within these walls, under the relentless discipline of the army's toughest training, that bonds were formed stronger than the divisions of society. In the crucible of boot camp, soldiers did not see race or religion. They saw only the man or woman beside them, equally exhausted, equally determined, equally bound by the same oath. As the decades rolled forward, boot camp continued to evolve, but its essence remained unchanged. Whether preparing for the frozen mountains of Korea, the deserts of Iraq, or the mountains of Afghanistan, the army never softened its standard. It knew that the battlefield had no mercy, and so the boot camp could offer none. Recruits today still face the echoes of those legendary trials. They still crawl under barbed wire as live rounds snap overhead. They still march miles with packs that dig into their shoulders. They still stand at attention as drill sergeants test their resolve with unrelenting pressure. And though the weapons may have advanced, though the tactics may have shifted, the human element of boot camp remains the same. The breaking down and rebuilding of the soldier's spirit. Those who pass through the gates of the toughest boot camps carry with them not only the skills of war but the lessons of endurance, sacrifice, and honor. They remember the sleepless nights, the bone-deep exhaustion, the moments when they thought they could not go on but did anyway. They remember the voices of their drill sergeants, harsh yet unforgettable, echoing in their minds long after graduation. And they remember the faces of the men and women beside them, faces that became brothers and sisters in arms, bonded by the fire of shared trial. Inside the toughest U.S. Army boot camp in history lies a story not just of training, but of transformation. It is the story of young people stepping into a world that demanded everything of them and gave back something far greater. It is the story of ordinary citizens remade into extraordinary soldiers. It is the story of sacrifice, discipline, and unbreakable will. And it is a story that continues to this day as every new recruit shoulders the weight of history and steps into the same crucible, ready to be tested, ready to be transformed, ready to earn the right to be called a soldier of the United States Army. And when the dust settles, when the shouts of drill sergeants fade and the final march is complete, only one truth remains, a truth written in sweat, in struggle, and in spirit. The toughest battles are not fought on the field, but within, and it is in conquering oneself that a soldier is truly born, truly